First, Mr. Chairman, thank you for holding this hearing. I'm glad I sat through the whole thing. It was extremely enlightening. And I know in the Senate, you're supposed to abide by the rules that even though a point has been made, it hasn't been made by everybody. I will break that tradition and thank the four of you for your testimony. I thought the exchange was fantastic. We learned a lot. And with that, I yield my time.
Very good. You may win the prize for brevity. I must say, I'm not sure you're going to make it as a senator. I'm not going to follow that line. There are several things I want to revisit. There was a claim mentioned earlier that it would take 20 years to develop advanced sharing technologies. Mr. Pearl, did it take 20 years to develop the AMBIT process?
No. I think that was a matter of the study was done in about 6 months, and it was completed within 12 to 18 months, if I'm remembering correctly.
Mr. Clark, are geographic carve-outs another way to share?
Yes, sir, they are. They are, absolutely. And on the point about 20 years, I was just saying it would take 20 years potentially to upgrade all the systems with the new technology. The new technology would be available more quickly, obviously.
And was the AMBIT process successful in enabling DoD and commercial 5G coexistence?
It did, yes, sir.
Some of my colleagues have also discussed low-power spectrum sharing, or CBRS. Mr. Pearl, do you think CBRS is a panacea, or do we also need full-power spectrum?
We need full-power spectrum as well. CBRS was the first really serious effort to do dynamic spectrum sharing in a band where it was really difficult. But you need both those high-power uses to really utilize the ability to penetrate buildings, walls, to really have the capital investment that the carriers need in order to offer a lot of those services. And so you need those high-power services. You need low-power services, which we have in 6 gigahertz and elsewhere. And both are important, absolutely.
Dr. Hazlett, I've heard concerns that CBRS has been underutilized because providers lack the certainty they need to invest in their CBRS spectrum. Do you share these concerns?
Well, there are some problems, as the FCC is acknowledging, and it's gone back to try to see how it can fix it. The claims were that was the solution, that was going to really have what is called sharing. I'll just mention the fact that all spectrum is shared. Okay, what's called exclusive use is not exclusive at all. You have networks in the United States with 100 million subscribers, and they share these aggregations of bandwidth. And in fact, there's all kinds of models that have developed between firms, between providers, when you do get the incentives to come together and make deals. And so in terms of, yes, people coming in from the private sector dealing with government assignments, the fact is that paying to share, in other words, paying to separate the allocations between the new users and the existing users, that's a very effective form of sharing. So it's really not just science, it's incentives to come together. That's why things like overlays are so important. It's why a better system of audits, which has been talked about, this has been suggested 25 years ago to the FCC, to in fact have by auction or assignment, have private firms come in and actually audit spectrum that's being used by government agencies to see if there are opportunities there for sharing. But maybe it's money coming to the agency in an improved version of the spectrum relocation process to get that out there.
Mr. Clark, we heard from my colleague Senator Fisher that a pipeline bill would require exclusive licensed use of and vacating or clearing DoD out of bands. Now, as you know, the Spectrum Pipeline Act that I've authored requires a pipeline of full power, not exclusive use, and does not identify any specific bands. Mr. Clark, is there anything in that bill that is inconsistent with your testimony or Senator Fisher's concerns?
No, in theory, it isn't. And I think the challenge will be implementation, because depending on how much your target is to try to clear, it may prove difficult to be able to work out an arrangement so that the commercial and military users can both employ that spectrum. And the auction may not be affordable or attractive from the commercial company's perspective, because the geographic patchwork they may end up with, or the spectrum sharing requirements are going to be such that maybe it makes it too expensive for them to pursue.
So, Mr. Pearl, we had an exchange with Senator Fisher and Mr. Clark where they were discussing the theory that China's public push to lead in wireless technology is just a mind game, that they're somehow baiting the United States with ambitious plans, and they're secretly holding back, trying to trick us into giving up spectrum to the commercial sector. I find that a particularly odd conspiracy theory, given the actual facts of what we know. First of all, we know that Huawei and other Chinese manufacturers are actively and successfully pushing worldwide adoption of Chinese 6G equipment standards. That wouldn't be possible without China having made its spectrum available for commercial use. Secondly, China has aggressively targeted our telecommunications industry, has tapped the phones of top officials, including President Trump and Vice President Vance, and prompted this committee to fully fund a multi-billion-dollar rip and replace program to remove Chinese equipment from American networks. Mr. Pearl, would American national and economic security be harmed if Chinese firms like Huawei and ZTE set the global standard for 6G network equipment via this first mover advantage? And how would that affect the global competitiveness of U.S. companies?
So it would have a great deal of harm, and I would echo my agreement that I don't think this is a disinformation campaign. I fought the battle against Huawei and ZTE for almost 2 years, and in order for their businesses to be able to sell equipment outside of China, they need to be able to use these bands inside of China and get those economies of scale. But if they're successful in terms of setting the global standard, that means that the U.S. will have a siloed market with a few of its allies and partners, where we'll have much worse technology, much worse networks. We'll just have an inferior ecosystem, and ultimately that means that we're going to be put at a military disadvantage because, as others have commented, in a battle, the electromagnetic domain can be absolutely decisive, and we just won't have the technology to prevail in that case.
Well, I want to thank all the witnesses for very helpful testimony. Senators will have until the close of business on Wednesday, February 26th, to submit questions for the record. And then the witnesses will have until the close of business on Wednesday, March 12th, to respond to those questions. And with that, that concludes